Hello and welcome to We Had Movies, and I'm your host Mo Yagi, and
Eric
your other
Leon.
Eric Leon, your other host. Woo!
Yeah.
Welcome back to another episode. Um, so for this episode, we decided to go a different direction for films. We've been doing a lot of like more family oriented level. Now we're going to go back to well, we kind of went adult a little bit, and now we're gonna get to go back to like children's sort of type films. Um, in a way, I mean, this is also still like a family movie. I would say it was something that
Mhm.
you would watch with your family. So if you haven't seen it, I hope that you take the time to consider watching it after what we talk about today. And yeah, Homeward Bound: The Incredible Journey. Um, it features three main characters, and it's a story about one dog, but his relationship with the two other pets as well, and his
Mhm.
journey. It's about Chance. So Chance is really the narrator of the story. Chance the dog is kind of a mixed breed. He's the mutt. He's the rescue. Um, he's not the he's from the streets, so he knows what it's like. He's been in and out of jail. He's been to the pound. He's been rescued
Right?
from the pound. Now these family, they're okay. They're treating him all right, but like, what does he have to go on? So he doesn't really trust anybody. He only trusts himself. So he's that kind of dog. And then you got your older dog who's been around for a while with this family, and it's Peter, the oldest son's dog, and his name is Shadow, and he's
Mhm.
what basically he shadows his his human no matter where he goes, and that's kind of like the ironic name I think that they gave him, Shadow, because that's the kind of dog he is. He's so loyal. He's loyal to the core. He will do anything to be with his human,
Mhm.
is the way they see it.
That's right. Yep.
And then you, of course, you have Sassy the cat, who
Mhm.
is kind of like the comic relief. Well, her and like the discussions that she has with Chance are kind of like the comic relief of the story. And Sassy's a cat, and she's, I guess, a Siamese cat. Is that what
Yes,
that
she's
is? Yeah,
Siamese. Yeah.
Siamese. Yeah. And I should know better since I have cats of my own, but yeah, she's a little cute cat in this movie, but seems like, we'll talk about a little bit further, but like she seems to have quite the presence in the film as well.
Yes.
And quite an importance, to be honest. So, but anyway, so you have these three main characters, and you have the narrator really is the voice of Chance, who's actually played by Michael J. Fox, which is really
Mhm.
cool. And then you have the voice of Shadow is done by an old school like vaudevillian actor who's like very popular for radio voice. So before even like movies were a big thing, that like radio was everything. So this guy, it was known for his voice, so it makes sense that they picked him to do Shadow, which you're thinking
Yep.
about voice actors. And then of course you have and he sounded kind of like a country western sort of type of guy. So yeah, he got that old country. I'm an old cowboy. I got to do what's right. I'm loyal to my kin and that sort of thing. And then you have, of course, the Sassy played by Sally Field, which is kind of funny. And if you don't know who Sally Field is by name, you would know her by reputation, of course. And she's done quite a bit of acting, even to she was at one point Spider-Man's aunt,
Mhm.
and the one version of Spider-Man, that the in-between version of Spider-Man, uh, after
That was the Andrew
to,
Garfield one, I think.
yeah, I think it's the Andrew Garfield one. Yeah, it was after the Tobey Maguire one. Yeah, but yeah, so Sally Field's been around. I'm sure she's done many other roles that are probably I couldn't even think of to name off but right now. But yeah, I mean, she's been around. and she did a really good job too with the voice acting. I thought like the comic relief was fun. I thought the back and forth between the two animals was really funny. And the thing is that I kind of already knew going into this film, rewatching it again from when I was younger. Um, it I knew that going into it, I would feel a little bit more distressed for the animals because I
You
already
brought animals of your own, right?
yeah, it was very different than
Exactly.
the
Yeah.
feeling that I had when I was a kid. When I was a kid, I was more like, oh, in awe of like these great animals, and it'd be like really cool to have one. But now that I've
Right.
had my own pets, I'm like, oh my God, I would be freaking out if my
I
pets
mean, you
ran
kind of
wild.
understand where the kids are coming from, right? Like that
Yeah,
the I mean, some there were certain scenes that kind of struck me, like when they were first of all at the beginning of the movie when they were leaving and the kids were under the impression that they were going back the next week when in fact it was going to be 2 weeks.
right.
At which point the new dad says, "Well, we'll only be gone for 2 weeks. It's not like they'll notice." And I mean, what we know now about animals and our pets and all of the research that's been done into that, it's like we know way better than that. Like I would never
Yeah,
say something like that now. I know my dog is going to miss me even after a couple of days, let alone 2 weeks,
yeah,
right?
absolutely. And that they would do anything to find you. Yeah. So
Exactly, right?
yeah, yeah. And I mean, it might be quite an incredible story that an animal would find its way home, but I'm sure it's not the first time it's happened that they would make it into
No,
the
in fact,
story.
it I've I think over the years everybody's heard stories here and there about
Right,
a cat or a dog that's trekked across, a few provinces or a few states to make it to their owner, right? And
right,
I mean, it's you hear few and far between stories like that nowadays. I think because people are a little bit more aware, but I
right.
mean,
Yeah,
it used to be, I mean, not common, but it used to happen more often than not.
yeah, absolutely. I think I agree. Like, there's more. It was a thing that could happen. Um, it. I think what was the region that we were looking at again? Because I believe it was filmed in Oregon, but it was supposed to be set in California. I think
I want to say
because
it was like just based on the geography. I want to say it's like if it was California, maybe like the northern part of California. I would even
yeah,
argue like
like they
maybe the
wouldn't have been touched
Washington
by the
area
fire that's
around
happening
there.
right now.
I mean,
So that's bad. Yeah,
it's hard to. I mean, obviously the
yeah,
mountains are the Rockies, but other than that, geographically, it's just a little bit hard to say
yeah.
exactly where. I don't know if they mentioned it at any point. Um, if they mentioned exactly where it was.
Well, I know
Just
that
trying to
they
think of
the family moves to San Francisco, but they don't actually make it all the way.
right.
They make it back to the house that they originally grew up in, right? So
Exactly. They ended up going back home. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So I'm curious where, and I think the next, because there is a sequel, right? And I think that one they end up in San Francisco. I think
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
yeah, I think that's where I'm getting the mix up there. But yeah, I mean, there was always it was definitely um an interesting journey, story that was compelling in a way. I mean, it was a lot shorter and quicker than I remember it. I remember it being longer, but like the scenes are actually a lot more quicker and abrupt. But there are certain challenges I noticed that it meets at certain points in the story,
Mhm.
and what those challenges would be. Like, of course, the first thing would be like they're going to get tired eventually. There's always the other challenge, which is that they're going to have to find food, right? So that was going to be another obstacle that they were going to run into eventually. And then, of course, even after running into the food, there was another obstacle, which is other animals, where
Mhm.
they Sassy the cat ends up catching some fish for all of them, and
That was
then
awesome.
they
She
get a
taught them to
conf.
fish.
She taught them to fish, and then they get bumped into by a bear or a family of
Or
bears.
even before then, it was Chance had an opportunity to meet a couple of of animals. Some of the more
Yeah,
common ones that we see. First, the raccoon in the tree, which I
right.
thought was hilarious when Sassy tells him he's not going to come down and meet you if you're barking him like that,
Yep.
which is my thought that I get whenever I got my dog outside. And then the skunk in the trunk with in the tree trunk, which I thought was hilarious.
Yeah.
Um, again, the more common critters that you see around here, and clearly their first introduction. But I thought it was a little bit interesting that Chance being essentially a stray dog has never encountered a raccoon in his life.
Yeah, yeah, that I mean again, we'd have to think regionally where they were
Sure. Yeah.
and like where he was in the pound, but like again, raccoons for us is like if you're living in North America, I guess I'm guessing it's more so for us as Canadians, but like yeah, they're everywhere. Like
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah.
And then, like you
So
said, the first, I think was it the bear cubs first that they
oh
wanted to
no,
pick.
there was the raccoon, and then there was also when he shoves his head into a barrel, and then he gets sprayed by a skunk. Now the sprayed by a skunk, they didn't play on it too much. They just kind of made it like, oh, he just went in there and it stinks, and then he got out. So we don't know if he got
Exactly.
sprayed, but I'm assuming that he got sprayed, and then he would have been a really sticky dog. Nobody would have wanted him back. They would have been like, no, thank you.
It was interesting how they kind of escalated the encounters with animals and went from
Yeah,
like from not so dangerous to like dangerous and dangerous and even more
yeah,
dangerous.
yeah. So then it was the bear. The bear was more like, and it was weird because the little bears that they had didn't. I don't think
Yeah,
they were related to the bigger bear in real life. Like I think those were like black bears, and then they had like a giant grizzly bear. Like it was
grizzly bear.
just.
Yeah, exactly.
I think they kind of just mixed it up, but hoping that the audience wouldn't notice the difference.
And
And
maybe back then that audiences wouldn't
yeah,
make that big of a deal about it, but I think nowadays
yeah,
people
yeah.
would probably.
They would have been like maybe or maybe it's just like maybe those bears aren't related but they're just like oh they ran away not because of chance but because there was actually a bigger bear coming. That could have been the joke
Yeah.
too. There's a lot of ways you could look at it. The other thing that was yeah, there was they got chased by a cougar, a mountain lion, right? And then the mountain
Right.
lion. Yeah, I should say mountain lion because like cougar it'll be too confusing. Everybody will think like what a 50-year-old woman was just chasing
Yeah,
after him.
exactly.
No, but like definitely it was a mountain lion and um he or she that lion was probably a female um knowing that she was hunting
Yep, exactly.
in the animal kingdom. It's how it works, I guess. And you see her chasing after like the two dogs, and the dogs figure out an ingenious way of using the teeter totter from earlier that Chance when he launched Sassy into the water,
Yep.
and to using the same methodology to launch this giant cat into the water the same way. Now, for all intents and purposes, like I love this scene. I think it's hilarious. I think it's funny that they did that, and like they got rid of the confrontation without being violent. Like they didn't have to
Hmm.
hurt the other animal to do it, and like because it's like again everything is doing its thing by nature, and you should just let nature do its thing. So in real life, if they had killed and eaten those dogs, like we should just accept the fact that that's what's going to happen. But I mean, I love this part, this kind of ending, which is just like everybody kind of gets off and gets away with being fine. And but it's such a typical Disney move, and I love that about Disney. But it's also something interesting that I wanted to bring up since we were talking about Disney films and this and specifically film about animals being brought to life, being more humanized, and that is just a Disney thing. That is Disney does animals best. If you ask me about any Disney film, humans tend to be the most boring part of the entire Disney World, if you think about it, really. Like they always make, even like the cowboy movies or whatever it might be, like the horse is usually more interesting than the actual
Well, I
rider.
mean,
You know what I
Disney has a
mean?
long history of doing like
Work with animals. Yeah.
animal centered movies, you know?
Yeah, well, like I
Um,
remember even watching documentaries back in the day where it's like they'd show them like the drawers focusing on like Bambi when they used to, when they were
yeah.
drawing all the animals, they would sit there and watch these animals and like investigate them to be able to draw like these like moments, these brief moments
Hmm.
to make it more real life. And I think it's interesting because that turned into like a world of investment in animals around the world. It's almost like Disney's the only reason why we haven't extinguished animals altogether. In a sense, you know, and you want to think like, well, at least we got capitalism to somehow accept animals in a way and like find a way to to profit off of them, but also without having to
Right?
abuse them, which is what Disney does best. And I think that's the thing. It's like when it came down to like, can you make films without actually using real animals? Disney was one of the first to jump in and say, "Yeah, we'll use animated films and animated animals."
Hmm.
I mean, like it says a lot about their concern when it comes to that sort of thing. So just I just thought it was interesting to bring up, and then also like just in general, like animals. I mean, you don't notice it unless you have your own pets, but they have these interesting faces they make just as much as humans do, and I think you capture like that. They capture that in these films as well, and they do that as well. And like, they just catch the right moment for the animal to say something funny, or you know,
Exactly. Yeah.
right? Like it's like that's exactly what that face is making. That face is saying this, like the part where she's like, oh, like she's like cleaning herself, and she just like she was just like woken up from being in the waterfall or whatever,
Hmm.
and then she's just like, oh, I must look terrible, and that's the only concern because she's a cat, right? So like she's cleaning herself because she doesn't like
Exactly.
them. So like they just like pick these really like specific moments, and you're like, yeah, you're right, like that's probably what the animal's thinking. Yeah, yeah, it's quite an interesting film for that reason. And then there's a couple of other scenes where again it's just like the way that Chance in the beginning was like chasing around um like the everybody in the living room looking for food, and then in the end he's the one eating the wedding cake, like it's the all that whole thing leading up to Chance eventually finding a way to ruin this wedding, like it's ceremony, I should
It
say, not the
was
wedding, but
so
like
fitting, right?
yeah, it was perfect. It was just so well done. Yeah. I mean, they were building up to it. There's like, scene where he's having a conversation with the chef. The chef's like, "This isn't for you,"
Yeah,
like,
exactly. And then he
like,
still manages to get some meatballs out of it.
yeah. I thought that was funny too. They made the chef particularly interesting looking. I don't know if it was on purpose, but he basically looked like the chef from like, like that goes after the crab in like Little Mermaid or whatever. Like it's just I don't know if they decided to dress him the same way or anything, like caterer, I should say. But yeah, yeah, it was interesting. There was a few other scenes. There was a scene with Shadow. Shadow was like
Golden Retriever.
the golden retriever, and um, I think with him it was more like existential. Everything that he he would bring to the film is like something for children to really like reflect on their soul and like who they want to
Right?
be.
Yeah,
And
he
it's
was
all
pretty deep.
yeah, he was very deep, yeah, and it was very the opposite of Chance and Sassy, right? They definitely made it seem like he was the
Well, he
older,
was like he kind of represented like, wisdom and just like
right,
experience, right? Like they kind of looked, especially Chance really looked up to Shadow for guidance, because he'd been a dog longer than him, right? And he'd kind of been around the block, if you will, more so than Chance. So it was very much, and in fact, a lot of times you could hear him warn Chance and the things that he was doing. He's like, "Oh, don't do that, pup. just kind of referring to him as like as a puppy, knowing that he's got to learn still, or he still has things to
Yeah,
learn about being a dog, right?
yeah. It's just like little things like don't stick your nose in things when you don't know what it
Yeah,
is. Like there's
exactly.
just like yeah, but it's almost like it's the same kind of nonsense that it's almost like metaphorical, right? It's just like don't stick your
Hmm.
nose in other people's business. Don't stay away from things you don't understand.
Oh, it's the same lessons that you would teach a
Yeah,
human being, right? A child,
right.
right?
Yeah. Exactly. Like, maybe you don't want to go sniff up that other guy's butt. Maybe he's not interested in
Right?
you, right?
Maybe,
So,
yeah, exactly.
you know,
Maybe leave that person alone on the bus. It's
yeah,
just
yeah. Just that person. I have a couple of friends who've been in situations where I'm like, maybe you should have just left that person alone. That would have
right.
probably not had any confrontation whatsoever if you had just left that person
And,
alone.
and it's it
Yeah.
is interesting, just the wider conversation about animals. It's interesting the way that the parents kind of teach their kids the same way that we do. A lot of times it's through experience, through
Yeah.
through having those confrontations or running or the young animals running into situations, and then you've got the parent having to bail them out because they did something stupid, kind of like
Yeah.
human
Yeah.
beings.
And I mean, uh, the silly thing is that I got emotional too around the end of the film where the animals, like, they start escape, they find their way to escape again from, but these people, like, they end up saving the little girl. That whole scene where they saved the little girl and they found the little girl, I was like, man, that is a touching moment. That is a really
It
like,
is. It very
it's
much is
like
because
it's hard
it,
it's
it
hard not
seemed
to feel like, wow, I would be so happy as a kid if I was lost and then these three animals just showed up to take care of me.
you could see how at first the girl was a little bit hesitant. She was a little apprehensive
Yeah.
because it wasn't a dog that she was familiar. And no, it was a moment where Shadow just he knew that she couldn't understand him, but he tried anyway to kind of communicate that no, I'm
I'm
okay. I'm
good.
an okay dog to be around. Don't worry about it. I'll keep you safe.
Yeah,
And it's
yeah,
very much what he did. He saved that girl's life. They all
yeah,
did.
save the girl's life.
By
And
keeping her safe.
yeah,
And
and
I mean,
it's just a
again,
very heavy
that's
moment.
that's not
Yeah.
that's not unheard of. That very much has happened in real life. And I mean, who's to say that some of these? I mean, we know that these animals can't understand languages, but there's something more to them that I think we don't understand, and I think we don't give
Yeah,
animals the
I
credit
don't
that they're
know
due.
about I don't know if they don't understand language. I just think that they don't use that sort of,
It,
they don't
I think
use
their
the
level
same
of
way.
comprehension is very different than ours. I
Yeah,
think
and
they
they don't
they
use
have the ability to
communication the same
understand
way.
like
Yeah.
tone and things like that. I mean, I certainly know from my own experience that our dog knows how to. He can learn all kinds of words and knows the meaning behind them and knows the tone that gets used behind it, right? So definitely, there's a greater level of understanding there than I think we give animals a lot of credit.
Yeah, I think so. I think they do learn where they can learn language. I think, of course, it's going to be harder for an animal to repeat what they hear than to understand what that
Oh, for
sound
sure, for
sound
sure.
means. But I think they learn, especially domesticated animals, like after generations and generations of domestication, they're so used to people that, like, they basically learn the way we do, right? They learn by repetition, by same, like, by continuous support. And like
Hmm.
once they get what they're looking for based on the communication, then they think that, hey, every time I do this, it's going to get me
Well,
the same
that's just
result,
it.
right?
Like it's all training, right? You train them, and you use the same. You have to use that consistency, right? Because that's the
Yep.
way they learn. That's the
Yep.
way they'll learn something. Is you just got to be consistent. The same way people are with children and reinforcing certain ideas with their kids and their beliefs with their kids. You just got to repeat the same thing.
Now
You know.
that's interesting that we're bringing this up because this also, it kind of incorporates with the idea in the film where when they trained these animals, they weren't just the same three animals that were doing all the scenes. They were actually different animals switched around.
Yeah.
And there's a couple of IMDb goofs, I would call them, where you can see that, like the scarring from the porcupine needles aren't in the one side of the
They're
face; they're
not
on the
real,
other,
exactly.
or
Yeah.
they're on the other side of the face.
Thought it
There
was
was,
interesting of what they
yeah,
did because there was the one scene when they're in the train yard and Chance, or rather Shadow, falls through the pit that was covered with the wood.
yeah,
And what I had read is, I mean, obviously they didn't harm any animals in the creation of this movie, which again is impressive considering the quote unquote stunts that some of these animals did.
absolutely, yeah,
Especially the mountain lion getting launched into the river.
yeah, yeah.
I mean, that had to have not been a real
But
mountain
no,
lion.
that
There's no way.
no,
There's no
no.
way. But anyway, um, it was it was interesting that I read that they didn't actually the dog didn't actually fall through the pit. There was actually like a platform right under the wood
Okay,
that broke. So he
right.
just landed on the wood. And then they put a fake dog in the pit to make it look like a dog that had been harmed in there. So that scene when you look down into the pit and you see like the
Oh, that
dog
was a
that's
fake
like
dog.
kind of
Okay.
that was a fake dog, yeah. So don't worry, you didn't see a harmed dog down there or a dead dog or anything like that covered in mud. I know
Yeah.
that was
And
I was
then
certainly like, oh my God, that looks awful. But then I
and
read
then
that it wasn't
yeah.
actually a real dog and I felt better about it.
And at the end of the end credits, it does have like a whole thing about it's monitored by the Humane Association of Oregon. So the whole film
Yeah.
was where it was filmed was being monitored for the Humane Association. So there's no way
And,
they were going to harm animals anyway. But
and I mean,
yeah,
a lot of, I mean, Hollywood doesn't have exactly the best history with animals and the way animals have been used in certain situations and in movies and in film. But I
yeah.
mean, certainly I think it's maybe some people would disagree, but I think it's gotten better since,
Yeah, and
say,
again,
100 years ago.
we're talking about a company like I said, like Disney, who can afford to be more choosy when it comes to things like that, using animals in their films. They have more like they can spend more money to make sure that their animals are more safe, and
And
you know,
I think now, I
I
think
mean,
it's
but what I
now
was
what
gonna, oh, sorry, go ahead.
yeah, go
Yeah.
ahead. No, you go ahead, go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say that with the talking about how we have all these different animals and that they're actually not the same dog in every scene or not always the same cat in every scene. And the reason for this is because like we were talking about how like we train animals, but like some animals too, just like people, are compelled to do certain things more than other things. So like
Yeah,
some cats, it's easy to train them to like walk on two back
for
legs,
sure.
where other cats, like they're just never going to learn that, they're just not
Absolutely.
interested.
For sure.
And so it's just like
You
that
see,
with dogs as well.
you
And
got to have
so
contingencies, right? Like maybe
yeah,
like you're not going to have that same animal do all of the quote unquote stunts in the
all the
movie
stunts,
because
yeah,
they're not going to be capable of doing them all, right? Like that's going to be
yeah.
one magical animal you got there.
Well, that's the thing, it's like at the end of the day,
And I
and
mean it's
I love the fact that like that they did it the way they did, but it's really like it's funny because you have two dogs and a cat and they are running in the wild in Oregon, and um and somehow the only way they could survive to get food is they needed the cat to use its fishing skills to catch fish for them because they were too stupid as dogs to be able to catch
well,
their own
and I think
animal.
it's one of the big it's one of the that apart from what I would say loyalty and family, that's one of the
Yeah.
big themes behind this movie is like teamwork, right?
Oh yeah,
Because
absolutely.
not one single one of those animals would have made it on their own.
Yeah,
They did
no.
it. The only reason they were able to do it is because they all helped each other, right? They didn't give up on each other. And I think, a good moment of reinforcing that is when Shadow's in the pit and Chance jumps down into the pit and he's like, I'm not going to leave you here.
Yeah.
You got me to get up when I needed to. Now I'm going to do the same for you.
Yeah, it was a very
And
moving moment.
Shadow
And
makes it, he makes it back with a limp at the end, but he made it back to his
no,
person.
correct me if I'm wrong, but like I totally remember like a scene in between, like somebody had to pull him out of there, but like for some reason that never happened. And I'm like, did I imagine a
Was it
scene where
be in it?
somebody helped
Maybe.
him out of the dog? Like so weird, right? Like because I'm like it just kind of goes to the ending and then they're all like, "Hey, our animals are running back to us." And I'm like, "What? Where's Shadow?" And then, oh, there's Shadow. He's there. He made it back. Of course he did.
Well, and all of this segues into a good point, and I think this is one of the big things that Disney's pushing now is that they're doing a lot of CG animals now,
Yeah,
just
yeah.
to kind of bypassing the real animals. I think in certain situations they do use them still, but I think if they were going to do Homeward Bound nowadays, I think you'd see a
No,
lot more
yeah.
special effects being used. And
Well, like you've seen those Disney animal movies, right? Like they do still do a lot of work with animals, but it's like very
they do.
much like watching
I mean, recently
documentaries.
with
Yeah.
Mufasa, right, coming out in the
Yeah.
theaters recently.
They're like
The
children's documentaries, basically.
yeah.
Yeah.
Honestly, my favorite one of all of those is still the Jungle Book. I think just because of the variety. I mean, it's
Oh
also
yeah,
like
for
a
the CG
like my
animals.
favorite
Yeah.
story. Yeah, I think they did a great job with the animation and just the way the animals look. It just looks really
Yeah, and
realistic. It was
I
just
think
kind
what
of
happens too is like with that you get more flexibility of what you can, like we were talking about, instead of having to do multiple animals play the role of one animal to
absolutely.
to do all the stunts. You could just do it all with one character. It's a lot easier. And then the other thing with animated, although it's again it makes it look fake, but
The voice work is different, right?
I mean, one day it's hard to say this out loud, but like one day some of these animals aren't going to exist anymore, and it is our fault as human
Absolutely,
beings.
no question.
And so it'll be nice for some kids to still be able to see animals, living in the real world, just like we did with dinosaurs in Jurassic Park, with all the
Right?
CG. I mean, it'll be something that somebody can still talk about at some point and be like, well, at least they can show us what we thought,
It'll be
you know,
regrettable,
they look.
obviously, but like,
Yeah,
yeah, there's at least some.
yeah. But the
If
other the
anything,
other the
I
other
hope
great
it, it,
stuff
it
about it.
inspires a generation to kind of try to preserve these animals rather than just lamenting that they once existed. You know?
Yeah, and like I
Um,
was just to go back to like what would really be great about the CG at the end of the day is, like I said, the flexibility and like be able to then build the story however you want rather than to have to depend on certain really well cut shot scenes. So like
agreed.
where they did these films back in the day with the actual animals, and I remember people talk about Milo and Otis, but like what
Yep.
people don't really know is that like the cats died like three or four times. Like the anyway, like there was like some really nasty
Well, and that's
statistic
just it.
about.
Hollywood has that dark history of using
Yeah,
animals in TV and movies that kind of
but I
goes into
mean,
that, and
I don't
it's
know if
really
it was on
unfortunate. But I feel
purpose,
like
but yeah,
no, and I think a lot of these teams, it's not having the right handlers, and I think that is a problem that's hopefully largely we've moved away from. I think there's a lot
right.
more professional organizations that are now involved with the handling of animals in TV and film. But I think also
Yeah.
the CG kind of helps protect some of these animals too. You don't,
Well,
like you
I
said,
think
it gives you
Milo and
more
Otis too is
flexibility, but
different
I think
because it was
also,
shot. I think it was shot in Japan, so I think it was a little bit different too.
okay, yeah,
Where
that'll be
the
different. I mean,
rights,
obviously
yeah, yeah,
you can't really do much about other countries and their
and their rights and their yeah over
and their
animals.
what they want to do with that,
Yeah.
right?
But I mean, at the end of the day, all it is to say, like, CG animals, it'll work for a lot to be able to tell a broader story or to be able to tell a more like specific story, because then you can just manipulate your computer graphics into whatever you want them to be, right? Like they can jump off a cliff, they can launch another animal off it. Like the way we had to do it before was be creative with the way we were filming and the way we would shoot scenes and replacing things with dummies like we were talking about earlier and stuff, where now they can just kind of skip all of that, just give you a good backdrop with live camera feed, and then and then just draw over it, right?
Yeah,
Like
exactly.
literally just draw over it, and then this is your new story. but I mean, it's just an easier way to tell a more compelling story. I mean, if they remade Homeward Bound now, it would be with CG animals, and I think it would be a lot more. You would see more time spent between the animals reacting with like actual animals in the wild rather than cut scenes of like a grizzly bear versus where the scene is probably not shot the same time as the actual dog being there or something like because
Yeah,
it
yeah,
would
yeah.
just like just certain things like that where now you could just be very creative with the story, I guess.
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, not to say that this wasn't an interesting film or that they had a lot going on for it, but it definitely you could see how they would have spent a lot more time and a lot more money attempting to manage this film um, when they could have just done it all in like a 6 hour span in like a studio or something. Which is crazy. It's crazy. I mean, and that's why you have to consider also like the value of these like new CG artists in this industry. Like they definitely do a lot more work than people realize, and it's you could have somebody who works specifically on just the eyes of the animal, or somebody who works
Oh yeah,
specifically on
there's a
just
lot of that stuff that
you
happens.
know what
Yeah,
I mean?
when they get into really, really granular details about like the
Yeah,
animals, you've got a guy that's just in charge of like the hair on the
yeah.
dog's balls or some shit like that, you know? Like it gets to like a ridiculous like level.
Yeah, and I mean, we have to give credit where credit's due. Like the fact that people are willing to put in that sort of work to save us so much time and so much
But I mean,
effort on.
it brings up a bunch of other questions too, and I'm talking about like the cost and of what it means to make these films, and I'm not talking about
Yeah,
like the economic costs. I'm talking about the human costs and the environmental
sure.
costs. Like, I think what a
Yeah,
lot of people forget is that when we use all this technology to make movies, it's like um, you're using a lot of computer resources, which uses up a ridiculous amount of electricity.
right.
So like just think for a second, like when a movie is completely CG, like some of these animated movies, the amount of power that goes into all
Yeah,
this.
that
Now,
would be an
obviously,
interesting
the
thought. Yeah,
technology the technology has changed a lot since the very first Toy Story movie got made. But I think at the same time, you're seeing a lot of animators, computer artists putting in like just the sheer amount of electricity that's used because you're talking about like hundreds of animators working on some of these projects with powerful computers and stuff. And I mean, it's a huge environmental cost, but I think also there's a human cost to it, and that's like these animators working ridiculous hours just so we can get the latest movie out on a particular schedule. And I mean, I would like to think that that's something that's going to change, but I think it's in large part the studios that are kind of in charge of that, and I don't see any reason for the studios to want to change the way they do things, right?
well, yeah. I
Um,
mean, when you're used to running things a certain way, and what the value of certain things were used to
they've got no
be.
incentive to change the way they're doing things, right? Because it's working
Yeah,
for them, and people aren't exactly complaining about it. I mean, they are, but like, what are they going to do, right?
right.
I guess
Yeah,
that's their reasoning.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's an interesting thing to think about when you're talking about this sort of thing, and um, the other thing that I it comes to my mind is also just it's okay. So you're talking about like the value of how much electricity it would cost, how much money people should make, but then also like what becomes of like the way we why the reason people raise animals, right? Like we've always raised animals because they were, it was interestingly brought up in the film as well, because they talk about how their animals are basically their family. And the boy really, like,
Mhm.
he goes into the police station, and he's basically asking asking
That
the
was funny. Yeah.
officer to find the missing family members, and he says missing
Yep.
family members, and he's not wrong. And it's funny because nowadays you would consider that a way of saying that, but then once he started explaining with the family members what they looked like, that's when the cop realized he's talking about his pets, and he's like, we can't waste time searching for pets. But like,
Right.
I mean, he's not wrong. It's not a police officer's job to search for, missing animals, but like, what are their jobs really? I'm just kidding. Like, what are they really doing? Are they really stopping drug dealers every day? Like,
Right.
they're not doing everything every day. They can go find somebody's missing animal. Like, that's a nice thing to do. Like, why is it up to like the firemen to get the cat out of the tree? I don't understand that.
Exactly.
Like, police officers don't have a time in the day to like come help with your pet. But anyway, that being said, there was a funny a whole thing where, yeah, so they bring that up that the animals are family members, and I'm thinking like, yeah, nowadays especially this would be understood, and kids wouldn't really want a pet for any other reason than to have that extra pal, at home.
I think our
And
perceptions of pets have definitely changed since this movie came out
yeah,
originally,
and that's what
right?
I'm trying to get at, is like, it's like people would have probably raised animals at a certain time period, and to think how many people would have raised them back then to possibly put them on TV, or to train
Hmm.
them enough to be like the best dog trainer or whatever, and compete in that sort of way. Whereas like that sort of incentive isn't going to be around anymore, right? So like people
No,
aren't
exactly.
going to, you know there's not going to be a room or space for that in this sort of society, other than maybe people training their pets to do stuff on TikTok, or I guess that's what you see more. Yeah, I mean, you see it. Like, people train their pets to do all kinds of funny things, and then they put them on like these quick videos. And I think that's probably the where we're going with that. It's like there's no space for them to make money anymore, like there used to be. Like,
No,
um,
definitely not.
having a trained pet is like a dime a dozen, and yeah, and just like all you can do now is just take care of your pet and then hope that it loves you, because it's never going to be of value to you. It's any pet you add to your family is just going to be more distress. That's just the way it is. I mean, you love them, but like, yeah, you love them, but at the same time, it's just another mouth to feed,
Mhm.
just like children. Yeah, but
They don't grow up like children.
no. And if it was a choice between having more pets or having more children, both Eric and I would definitely agree on more pets. So that's
Yes.
just that's just our general opinion. Too many of us in the
Right?
world. I mean, if you think about, just like this film makes you think a lot about the juxtaposition of like how much wilderness is really left versus how much is it taken over by people. And I mean, there's still a lot of space on the planet, but I mean, if you think about how much of the planet's space is still being taken up more so by anything, it's by us, by human beings.
Absolutely it
And
is.
we're by the billion now. And like, I think we've won. I don't think we need to spread any further. I think animals get it. We're the boast in the animal kingdom, and we're always going to be, and we won. So I think we can start calming down on it. Like, I think we've trumped nature, so let's just like figure a way to make it
Nature's fighting
contain.
back.
I think so. I think so. I think in a way that it needs to, in a sense. But yeah, I think that, I miss that. You could go out to the wilderness and see that the sort of sites that they show in these older films, um, but they don't exist as much as they used to, and it's hard to believe that. I mean, there are places that they're doing the opposite. They're taking care of it. So I shouldn't say that. I should say we just need to do more. We always need to do more, and it's always to take care of our environment and to like
Mm.
have that environment exist like they do in those states. And yeah, and then also take care of your pets and make sure that you don't just leave them at some person's farm if you don't think that they're going to be contained properly. Like, geez, like she just leaves them there. Like, oh yeah, they're not going to go anywhere. That's the other thing of the story, right? Like how did the aunt who takes care of these animals decide that they didn't need to be left in cages or something while she's gone? Because like they literally just left their home. There's no chance that they're not going to try to run away. Like,
Exactly.
like what is this person? Like, have you
It was
ever
very
trained an
surprising.
animal? Yeah, like you have horses. Do people live differently back then when it came to having animals? Like they were like nonchalant with their horses. They were like just leaving them out like
Must
for
have.
anybody. Yeah, I guess. I mean, must be a really good year for cowboys to steal your horses. I don't know. But no, but that being said, I don't know. It was just funny that they set up a situation for these animals to get away, and then they did, and they gave them a backstory and a nice little like narrative and a journey and um, and like I said, they had these different like levels of like confrontation that they had to deal with, just like any other hero of any story. And I do like that they ended in the end they ended up like saving like a princess basically. Like it's like they went through like the same stages of like a classical like English, or like British, night novel or something. Like it would just be like, like they went through this incredible journey, confronted incredible beasts, um, found ways to feed themselves, found ways to escape, found ways to overcome obstacles. And then in the end, they save somebody, they become the hero, and then they go home and then they end their journey. And it's like, and then they get to go home and they get to be with their family and their friends and they're happy and everything's, yeah, it was just that kind of story. And just done with animals, loving little domesticated pets. And I think the story, like they do talk about that too a few times, where they're like, "Well, you have domesticated animals lost in the wild. Yeah, there's a good chance they're not coming home, right?" Like that was brought up a few times in this film. So just to keep kids realistic, like don't just purposely try to lose your pet in the wild. You know,
Yeah, I
it,
didn't. I thought the same thing that there's no way these animals are actually surviving on their own out here,
yeah,
realistically, right?
yeah, yeah. I
Like
mean,
maybe for a little bit, but
you
for
did
as
say
long
like
as a
before, like there have been incredible journeys where animals have instinctively found a way, and they have that little feral instinct that still can help them. But at the end of the day, like yeah, the chances are slim. Like yeah, if they do get found, they
well,
do.
if
I
there
mean,
was a way to track how many times it's happened and then compare it to how many of the pets
yeah,
actually made it back home, it's probably a low percentage. Just that there's just so
yeah,
many like natural, not think natural dangers, but then think about like in an urban area or a suburban area, you're talking about even more dangers, right? So to be able to navigate all of that stuff, I think requires an incredible amount of luck. I mean, yeah, it
yeah,
requires an
yeah.
intelligent animal, but also an unbelievable
Right.
amount of luck as well, right?
Right. Yeah. And that's the thing. It's not just, I think the story is not just about loyalty. It's not just about family. It's also about dedication. And I think
Absolutely, for sure it is.
perseverance that,
Perseverance,
yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
They
Over,
none of
oh,
them none of them gave up on one another, and that's what allowed them to actually
Survive.
complete
Yeah.
this journey, right?
Yeah.
Because, like I said before, there's no way any one of them would have been able to survive this on their own.
Yeah,
Like,
I
no
mean,
way.
Sassy basically had to be found by some random guy in the wild who took care of
Yeah.
her, right? Yeah, she basically didn't survive. Like she needed help. And so that's the other thing too, is like their luck of finding their way through this journey. And it didn't just count on them, it also counted on a lot of other things. But it's just that the important part is that they did it. Like they pushed through regardless of how hard it could have been, right? So and I think that's the important part is it, and that's something to be said for everybody in general when you're talking to them. And I think this is something that we haven't really talked about before in with previous films, but it's all about the journey, right? It's at
Mhm.
the end of the day, you shouldn't have to worry about how it's going to end, because even Shadow was like, I'm willing to accept that this is my end. I'm defeated, but at the end of the day, it's like it's not for you to decide how it's going to end. So just enjoy the journey, enjoy the way, the ride, enjoy the time that you have, and try to always go for the things that are important to you. And in this case, what was important to them was to get back to their family, right?
Exactly.
So
And I
yeah.
think by the end, Shadow, I think finally, or rather, Chance finally realized what it was to have a family and to have a home. And I think that it wasn't just the incredible journey that they all did, it was also Chance's journey. From going from like a street dog, a mangy street dog, to having you
I
know
mean, again, it's
an
not just
actual
irony.
family dog.
Irony. It was selected. His name was selected. His name is
Oh,
Chance,
for
right?
sure. Yeah,
So, yeah. I mean, he's a lucky dog. That's the whole point. Is that he gets
for
like
sure. Yeah.
even when at the one point where they were pulling the needles out of his face. From the porcupine needles, they were like, "Yeah, you're a lucky dog." Because again, it could have gone in his eye. He could have gotten it right, but he just happens to be the lucky character in the story. And then you have Sassy, who is exactly what she's called. She's just a lot of sass. She's like, hey,
Hmm.
I know I'm the best out of all of us for survival, so and I'm gonna give it to you. Yeah, and that's the no, I thought she was really. I did think it was funny that it was really the cat carrying the team. Like if it wasn't for Sassy, they wouldn't have eaten. They wouldn't have eaten for days. I mean, they might have survived, but they wouldn't have eaten for days. Like so, yeah. But yeah, I mean, I'd like to look up those statistically, like the chances of
Of an animal, of a domesticated pet, surviving that.
yeah, domesticated dog.
I certainly don't see it them lasting
I wonder
very
if that's
much.
something that somebody's verified before, though.
You could be right. Yeah,
I mean, all it says is hey, AI is telling me that a domestic dog's chances of surviving in the wild depend on many factors, including their breed, health, and access to food and water. Some dogs may survive for weeks, while others may survive for years. Factors that affect survival, again, like we said, breed, health, access to food and water, surroundings, home situation. That's funny. You can actually train your dog to survive in the wild in case they ever get lost. So how to help your dog survive in the wild: train your dog to eat certain plants and bugs, train your dog to hunt animal game like rabbits, mice, and squirrels, and spend time outside with your dog to get them accustomed to nature. Yeah, I mean, yeah, if you train your dog to be a hunting dog, then he's probably going to be able to survive better in the nature. Yeah, makes sense.
right.
Yeah. I mean, just to say an animal is domesticated, it doesn't mean necessarily that they haven't been living on a farm either, right? I mean,
That's true.
a farm cat I know will catch you rabbits, whereas my cat sitting at home, she might try to catch a rabbit, but probably will miss the first few times,
Hmm.
first few hundred times. Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah. but you don't know. Like feral instinct is still in them. So yeah,
And that's just it. They've got hundreds, if not thousands of years of instinct, you know, right in them. So they can fall back on a lot of those instincts, in a given moment, right? It just
yeah.
really depends
I
what
mean,
kind of
people are
situation they
like that
find
too,
themselves in,
right?
right?
Like, yeah. I mean, I guess if
Absolutely, yeah.
you put a person in a certain situation, they'll find a way to survive, and I think that's the survival instinct of any animal. I think at the end of the day,
Well,
like,
hey, I mean, they say that human beings are the most adaptable animals on the planet, right? So
yep, yeah. I mean, that's why we're doing it.
that's why
We're
we're still
winning.
here.
That's why we're winning.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for everybody listening to this episode. I want to give a shout out again to our music host who we always often play the music at the intro and at the end, just because I haven't said it in a while, but again, it's a shout out to Nixon Out. Nixon Out, they're an interesting hip hop group from Alberta, a province here in Canada, and they do quite a bit of different interesting songs. I mean, they're worth a listen to. So if you ever want to go on Spotify or one of the other places that you're listening to us and check them out.
Come
So
out.
Nixon Out, yeah. And thanks again for listening. And the next time we should be meeting up will be Black History Month. So check it out in February. We're going to be doing a couple of films in relation to that. So yeah,
All
keep
right.
on going. Take care.
Take care.
Give me that in the city cheer. Jump around in my whip, itty bitty, looking pretty chill. Put my shades on, you ain't even seen it yet. Man, I'm so fresh, and you know I'm always spelling cheer. Give me what you want, what you got, cause I never get enough. You ask me how I want it, and you say you want a chance on me. Chances are you don't know how to do this shit respectfully. I say it like it rough, cause I need a man protecting me. I ain't say this shit for later. I said, baby, come and get it. Feels taking over if you let him. I'ma take the paper, I'ma roll it up, and later he might do what he wanted, cause I let him. Give me something that I'm never gonna forget, because baby, I'm the only one you gotta impress. I won't take any more, and I won't take any less. I'm the queen in this, you know I got the finesse. Give me that, give me that, give me that. Give me that feeling. Bring it back, bring it back, bring it back. Like when we were young. Like when we were young. Like when we were young.
Bring it back, yeah, just bring it back. Sitting in the back, yeah, I'm rolling up some Trinidad. Feeling like the bestest, always got the best shits. Come on round, baby, yeah, you knowin' who the best is. And that's just for the record, so y'all don't get it twisted. I ain't talking tease, even though I'm buzzing, listen. You don't wanna miss it when you get the feeling. It'll make you real explicit, like a new addiction, baby, it'll take a hold. I know you're feeling cold, cause I've been feeling cool. You give me all these feelings that I used to have in school. These butterflies got me feeling light, like I'm floating through the air, hanging out like a satellite. Yeah, it's really got me feeling right. All around me, yeah, looking like a ceiling light. Hanging out, where the heather glows. See me from the center of the earth with no telescope.